Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMS Cast. I'm joined by a special guest and good friend. His name is Nick Usborne. I've known Nick for about 6 years, and he is a prolific course creator and writer, teacher. He's been in this industry for a long time. He's got a new project called Your Awesome Life Story. We're going to dig into that today. But first, welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Always fun to talk with you.
Well, tell us what your awesome life story is.
It's
And by the
basically,
and by the way, I just wanna say head over to yourawesomelifestory.com so you can look at what we're talking about. And Nick,
sure.
if it's possible, maybe turn down your speaker volume a little bit. I can hear it coming through your mic just a little bit.
Oh, all right. Let me have a look. Um, so say something to me. I can make sure I can still hear
Yourawesomelifestory.com.
you. And does it sound any better now?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, cool. All right. All right. So what is it? It's basically a service, I guess, for people who boomers or say you're over 50 and you want to create a record of yourself, of your life. So it's about writing your life story. It's part of kind of the family history, scrapbooking, journaling, that whole thing where people don't want to lose everything. Like I've spoken to so many people who say, "Oh man, I wish I'd done that with my dad or with my mom or with my grandma before she passed, because now I know she had so many kind of stories and lessons to share, and she did such great thing, interesting things in her life, and there's no record of it, so it's kind of lost to us." So the idea of writing and creating and then publishing a life story is it's kind of a legacy. It's something you can share with your kids, with your family. It can be passed down so your grandkids can find out about your life. And there's so many. I started off when I started creating this was just, hey, wouldn't it be fun for people to create their life story? And then the more I got into it, the kind of deeper I found the topic became. I was talking to someone who does kind of activities in a retirement home, and she was saying, "Hey, that's great. There's so many people here who would like to record their stories, but so many other fringe benefits, like getting a group of people together to share their stories, to get to know each other better. There's I don't know. It's just such an adventure. The more I dig into it, the more I see this as a kind of life adventure of, yeah, why do I want everything that I've done, everything I've learned to be lost? It'd be, hey, I got some particular stories that my kids just love. They just like say, hey, tell me the story about when you, and this is usually like when I was in my teens or early 20s when I was kind of crazy. And they want to hear those crazy stories. And if I didn't share them, they wouldn't know. And I'm sure from my parents, that particularly my mum, my dad left some of his stories behind, but my mum didn't. And there's probably so much there that I never, she was just like mum, right? But I didn't know her before, she was married. I didn't know what her aspirations and what she did when she was younger. So I think there's a huge loss within a family, and it connects family, it connects generations. A grandson can say, "Hey, you know what? Grandpa's not so different. He had these same struggles when he was young."
When I
So
think about Nick, I think about the story of you living in a cave in Turkey, I believe.
yes.
Uh, it's just that's such a cool story, like, let's make sure it's not forgotten one day, you know?
Actually, I use that as an example in the course, and I haven't. That's not lost. I've written that one up with text and story and photographs and everything. So yeah,
Well, you're a writer, very talented writer, but your awesome life story is for anybody. And
right.
what's your approach to getting people that aren't necessarily writers or YouTubers or content creators to capture that, which is particularly common, especially in the older generations today, not being creators, if you will, for the modern web.
Well, I think all of us have some capacity to write. Yeah, because even if we're not writing for the web, we've written letters. If you're old enough, you've written letters, you've written postcards. You know how to communicate. And one of the things I say in the course is, hey, you don't have to have had a celebrity life to make your life story worth sharing. Your kids don't care about the celebrity stuff. They just want to learn about you. Um, And also, you don't have to write like you're, John Grisham or Stephen King. You can just write in your own voice. And sometimes you'll get a younger person helping a grandparent with their life story, and they'll likely just record them on video or audio and say, "Hey, Grandma, tell us about." And then that can be transcribed if you don't feel like. So there's all kinds of different ways to do this.
And what are some of the formats? Like, if it's not a book, it could be what?
Well, my dad wrote up just a part of his life because I was raised on a farm and my dad had that farm for 30 years. So his life story, he didn't talk about his when he was younger, he didn't talk about when he was retired. He just talked about those 30 years. And he actually did it just simply as a binder, like a scrapbook. And he typed up the story, he added photographs, there was like newspaper clippings, things like that. So yeah, he was retired when he did it, and he just sat down at his typewriter and kind of wrote it up. So that was a binder. There's another member of my family, like a second or third cousin, who's actually built a kind of family story as a website, which is also kind of interesting because the thing about if you did it on a website, it's kind of a living history because you can add to it. Somebody has a grandchild, or you suddenly remember something, or you find some photographs in the attic. I mean, when my both my parents have passed, and particularly when my mother passed, she was the second to go. There were so many boxes of albums and photos and things like that, and it was fun to look at. But the trouble was, a lot of those pictures had no context. I'd love to say, "Hey, Mum, where was this taken, and why did you keep this, and what was this?" And we never really had. So we had bits and pieces and old letters and postcards and I don't know, old ferry tickets from vacations going, like from England to France. So just all kinds of stuff. Um, so yeah, you can add all kinds. I've kind of lost track of the question now. I'm rambling. Feel
Well,
free
it's
to
just the
stop me.
content, the different formats it could take. So
Yeah,
books,
so it could be
pictures.
a website, could be a binder. Another friend I have who he originally set out just to write like a letter to his children. So that's kind of a format. You sometimes see that, letter to my younger self or yet letter to my children. So he was going to do a letter to his children because his kids were leaving school, they were graduating, but they had no education in finance and money at school. And you thought, well, that's not good. This friend he went through all kinds of struggles and he tried different businesses and they didn't work. And then suddenly they did. And now he's very wealthy and very comfortable, and he wanted to share that with his kids. So he started off just like as a letter to my kids. And then he thought, well, hang on, there must be other parents out there who feel the same, that their kids get no education in money matters and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So he turned that into an actual book. And it's like I got a copy here somewhere. It's like a 300-page book he had published, by a big name publisher. So you can go that route. Or you can just do it yourself. You can publish it just as an ebook, as a PDF, or you can take that PDF and publish it on like the Amazon Kindle. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, or you could do it just as audio or video. It's
Take us through the mechanism or how you approach helping somebody achieve this. Because I know it could seem like a big project, but how do you kind of ease into it in your course of like process? How does somebody get started and on the path? And what are some of the milestones and methods in your course?
so I take them through kind of steps because, like you say, it can feel overwhelming. Like I have no idea how to do this. So I say, okay, step by step. So step one is like, why are you doing this? What's your why? Well, I want to hand this down to my kids. Or the why it could be a journal of rediscovery for yourself. It could almost be therapy for yourself. Is like, hey, there's all kinds of stuff I went through, and I just want to review that and go back through that, and so it can be therapeutic too. And also the why is yeah, like why do you want to do it? Then there's the who. But who are you doing this for? Is this just for immediate family? Is it kind of really an intimate thing just for immediate family, or is it for like extended family and friends? Or is it for everyone? Like my friend who published it, as a big name publisher. Is it this for everyone? That matters too. And then I say, okay, let's now gather together all your stuff, boxes of stuff. These are the building blocks, the kind of bricks of your story. And then we get into, okay, how do we structure this? Like, how do we find the beginning, the middle, and the end? Where do we begin? So I have a big bit on. So basically, what I'm doing is I don't throw anyone at the deep into the deep end with the course. I say, okay, why are you doing this? Who are you doing it for? Where's your stuff? Let's put that into a structure, and then in the next session we look at, okay, we got a structure, but let's do a bit of storytelling here. Let's apply some of the kind of theory of story to this and make it maybe a little bit more exciting to read, interesting to read, rather than just kind of dull prose, as it were. And then there's all kinds of tools that I talk about, and one of the things I do right at the end is kind of a section that's almost, I don't think I title it this, but it's close to saying, hey, I'm not dead yet. Like, here's my story so far, but maybe my story so far can inspire me to do other stuff in my life. So I might, as I'm writing my story, think, you know what? That was such a period of my life that you mentioned, like I lived in Turkey for a while. I could say, you know what? I should go back there. I'm going to put that in the bucket list. I'm going to go back to Turkey and revisit that place and see if any of the people I knew back then are still there. So that's what goes in my bucket list. Or it could be something I haven't done. I've never been further east. I've never been to the Far East. I quite like to go to the Far East. So I'll put that on my bucket list. So when you do your life story, it's it's a voyage of rediscovery for yourself and for your family. But it can also be an inspiration for, hey, here's some of the things I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm not done yet. It could be volume two somewhere down the road. Or if it's a website, then you just keep adding to the website. Okay, here's the journal of finally my trip out to the Far East. Here's the journal, and I put it on the website.
Funny question for you. What if you're feeling a little overwhelmed? Like, oh my gosh, there's so many stories, so many different parts of life. How do you choose like what to not focus on?
Well, part of it, and again, I go through this in the course, is like there are some things that you don't want to. Like I said, my brother was writing a book, like a memoir, and he was chatting to me and he was asking me about stuff. And there was a particular episode that he said, "Oh, I want to put this in," and he mentioned that, and I was like, "No way," because that particular episode was very personal, very painful for me back in our early childhood. And I said, "No, please do not. I do not want that shared." So there's some things that you may not want to share. And definitely in terms of privacy, if it involves someone else, you should ask them before you before you decide to share that. Or it could be, hey, maybe I've had struggles, maybe I've had addiction, maybe I had problems with an early relationship. Is it good for me to go back through that? It might be. Do I want to share that with everyone? Maybe I do. If this is a story and part of redemption, maybe I don't. So you're going to go through stuff, and it's like any kind of editing of any kind of story or anything like that is the stuff you want to put in and the stuff you don't want to put in. And part of it, I talk about a push pin structure. Like think of highlights. Like again, you talk about the trip to Turkey. Okay, that's a kind of push pin thing. I'll put that up on the wall. That's interesting. It was interesting when I moved from England to Canada. That was a big deal. I'm going to put that in. It would, you know what I mean? So there's, you can kind of do almost like a highlights reel. You don't have to cover everything. No one wants to know everything. But think about what's interesting to you, but also think about what would be interesting to your kids, to your grandkids. What would they like to know about you? And also, like one of the things that I've done, and I talk about in the course, is like because the world changes so quickly. Like, I've got in the course a picture of a slide rule. So slide rule is what we used to use at school before there were calculators. But I mean, my kids and their kids, they wouldn't, if I showed them a picture, a slide rule, they'd have no idea what it is. So I kind of put that in there because it's kind of interesting. Like, wow, think of all the changes that have taken place just over a relatively short period. So it's fun, and I hope at no point did I kind of say, oh, this is hard work. I really don't want this to be hard work. This is fun. This is exploration. This is going back through. This is like ringing up old friends, someone you haven't spoken to for 20 years, and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. And I suddenly thought, do you remember that trip we took? Do you remember that concert we went to? Do you remember that time we misbehaved? Whatever it is. And it's so you can reconnect with people. I've done that. I went back to England and I reconnected with one of my very first bosses after I left school. Like I worked in a quarry, and he was a master mason, and he was a fantastic guy. He had a huge influence on my life. I when I went back to see him, I hadn't seen him for over 20 years, So that was again part of rediscovering important times in my life, important people in my life. And I think we're always kind of rushing forward. We're so obsessed with the present and the future, and the past is kind of gone. And I think that's a shame. I think like my process of creating the course. I've necessarily gone through the process myself of creating this life story for myself, and it's really interesting, and it is healing in a way, and and it's so interesting to look at those big forks in the road. Like when I came to Canada from England, what if I hadn't? What if what stimulated me to come to Canada? I wouldn't be talking. I probably wouldn't be having this conversation with you now. We wouldn't have met like the way we did all those years ago. So there's these forks in the road, which are kind of fascinating when you look at them. Like, wow. And I've spoken to that about that with my kids of like, hey, just imagine if, because my kids, I bumped into their mother. Oh, I guess it's always the case. It's like almost I wasn't looking for her. I just bumped into her, and all of a sudden before you know it, we're married and having children and stuff. What if I hadn't, she was in fact the person who sold me my first flat, my first apartment in London. What if I'd gone to another realtor? What if I hadn't seen that ad, whatever it was? Everything changes. So it's kind of fun. It's really interesting. And I've involved my kids a bit in it. Because again, part of my story is my life with my children, raising my children. So I said, hey, do you remember that time? And sometimes we have very different memories of, what, they'll say, do you remember? And I'm like, no, what was that? And then they remind me, and I think, oh, true, that was great. Anyway,
Let's talk more about that therapeutic aspect. Like, what are particularly, I think, when you're getting older, retired, there's some pain of loneliness, boredom, uh, maybe looking for meaning and significance. And you're talking about how good it can be, but what's some of the kind of the negative side of like where people are at later in life that this could really help with?
I think it's part of it, and I talk about this in the course, is, this is when I was talking about retirement homes, the lady there who's in charge of activities there. So one of the biggest issues there is that people become less social. They have fewer social connections as you get older. You tend to have fewer people around. So she was saying that what she loved about the idea is that it gathers older people together in a group, and all of a sudden they're talking with each other, and somebody says something and someone else just bursts into laughter and says, oh, that was me too, I did that, or I saw that band, or oh my goodness, we were at the same event and we never even knew. And it just brings people to life a bit, I think. And it's like, and even if it's not old people, it could be, I don't, maybe I'm old, I don't feel that way. But just like I said, reconnecting with that boss of mine, having conversations with, I got back in touch with the headmaster of my high school, and we had a conversation. So again, it's kind of reconnecting with people, and again, for sure, I've thought about and revisited moments in my life that were not wonderful, and again, that can be really helpful to revisit those moments where things were not great. Um, so I just think it's ever since as you know, I've created lots of courses, and they're generally in the marketing space. This is kind of a new departure for me to do something outside of the digital marketing space. This is just for anyone and everyone. Um, and it just started off as just this little tiny spark of an idea. And what generally happens with me is a spark of an idea either kind of flickers and goes out, or it just starts this like
Fire.
blaze. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's been like that for me with this, is I find it so interesting. I find it so fascinating. Um, and I love like stories are, man, everyone loves stories, right?
Yeah.
And stories are great connectors between generations, between cultures from across the world. I can sit down and laugh about something silly that has a it's a story about Thanksgiving dinner. And hey, you could go to Japan, go to China. They may not have Thanksgiving, but they'll have those holidays, and they'll have the same experience. They'll have the same funny stories, different language, different culture, different place. But stories kind of bind us as humans, and their stories endure. Bible stories, pre-Bible stories, stories, ancient Greek stories, ancient Rome stories. These stories are still alive, and they connect us with the past. They connect us with the present. And stories like, hey, I remember reading my kids stories at bedtime. They're such a central part of who we are and how we connect with others, whether it's different cultures, different age groups, different anything, everything. Like they're the kind of glue that hold us together. So when I talk about your awesome life story, I mean I mean it when I say awesome. I mean, like whatever you may think, oh yeah, my life wasn't that interesting. Well, I bet it was. I bet you have some good stories to share. You don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a superstar to have a story worth sharing. So yeah, for me, this has just turned into like this big roaring project. And like I say, every time I turn, everything I look at, I just think, oh man, that's interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting. So it's kind of growing like nuts now. Like for instance, that thing of like the retirement homes never occurred to me when I started the project that people in homes might be interested in me helping a group of seniors sit around and tell their life stories. And it was only when I started talking to the kind of administrators and activities people there that said, "Oh my goodness, this would be wonderful because it addresses so many issues of community, of socializing, of memory. It stimulates memory in older people. It's really good for older people and their kind of brain health, as it were, to remember stuff. It's really helpful for them. So it never occurred to me that when I started the course. But like I say, the deeper I go, the more the applications I find and the more interested I become. And that's important because as you know, like starting and publishing and selling a course is not always easy. There are bumps
Yeah.
along the road. It never I always think it's going to take off, go viral. A gazillion people will buy it on day one. It doesn't happen. So there's a grind. You have to keep on grinding, 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 working at it. And if you don't love it's really hard, that grind. But if you do love it, then it becomes easier.
So I watched the movie last night, the new remake of Moby Dick, and the author, um, had to kind of work hard to get one of the survivors as an old man who was a kid during the incident to tell his story.
Hmm.
So if you're a kid or a partner, spouse, or friend, and you're trying to encourage the person you care about to, that you think this might be really good for them, or you're just genuinely curious and you want to get those stories captured. How what would you say to somebody like that? Or it could be like the retirement home activity coordinator to encourage somebody to buy into the idea of doing this.
Well, I mean, you can't force it. I guess, there'll be people who are very private and don't want to.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say generally, more often than not, we like it when people express interest in us and our lives.
Hmm.
It's kind of, oh, you're interested in me, you're interested in my life. That's cool. Let me tell you stuff. And I think particularly if there's a strong bond there, like hey, I'm just thinking if like one of my grandkids asked me something like that, I'd just melt, right? Because it's my grandkids. So I'd say, sure, of course. Come sit here. I'll tell you some stories. And your dad can tell me to shut up if I tell stories that aren't appropriate. But it's like I think most of us we like the idea of being asked, like because it makes us feel not important, but it makes us it's like our life matters.
Yeah.
It's like an endorsement of like it is. It's like the subtext is Grandpa, your life matters to me. And that, like I said, that makes me melt inside. So, yeah, but like I say, you can't force it. Some people are very, very private and they won't want to. They won't want to talk about stuff like that. Or they'll have had, a lot of almost insurmountable difficulties in their life and they just don't want to revisit that. And you got to respect that. Say, okay, that's okay. And if you're in a group setting, like in a retirement home, maybe out of a group of 6 or 7 people, maybe there'll be 1 or 2 who just like to sit there and listen, and that's okay.
What's like a realistic timeline for somebody to go through this process? Just in general, I know different strokes for different folks, but could somebody pull this off in like a couple months, 3 months?
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's about right. You can do this in 2 or 3 months. One of the things I say in the I kinda interrupt one of the sessions in my course and say, "Okay, hang on." And that's where I'm talking about the discovery process of finding all this stuff and maybe interviewing some old friends or school teachers or old bosses, or maybe finding maybe your local paper's still there and they have archives and you can go back to when you were a teenager or you played on a sports team and you think it might have been in the newspaper. All this kind of discovery stuff. I say, don't rush this. The process of putting together the raw materials for your story. I mean, the journey is half the value. Yes, it'll be great when you're done and you can share this, but like the real value here is this journey of putting it together. Um, yeah, so don't rush it. Like you want to, and it's tricky because I also say, look, don't slow to a crawl and lose momentum, but don't feel there's like a deadline, and like enjoy and be present for those times when you're discovering stuff or you're interviewing someone or you're going out for a beer with someone that you haven't talked to for 15 years or 20 years. Don't rush that stuff, because even if at the end you never put this down on paper, which I hope everyone does, or on whatever medium, even if just the process, just going through the process up to that point has huge value. I think of exploring, re-exploring your life through the stories of your life.
it's almost like a working vacation. Like, it's fun, but
I
there's
think
some work aspect to it, but, like, yeah, it's
yeah.
enjoyable process.
Yeah, and there's no deadline, there's no failing, there's no it's just a journey, I think, like I say, I keep trying to think of like what was the original spark, and I can't remember. I think there was just like a page in a book that I read months and like in the middle of last year, that I just think it just that was just the spark, and I can't remember the book, and I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I was reading a book, and I don't think I finished the book. I think when I had that spark, I stopped on that page, and I thought, "Now that," and it wasn't about life stories. It was about life, but I can't remember why it sparked the idea. But yeah, sometimes you just never know where it's going to come from. The idea.
What's your approach to teaching in the course? Is it like videos, text,
I
assignments? Like,
do,
how do you
yeah,
do it?
I do kind of video. First of all, I build PowerPoint, because I want
Mhm.
to show things, I want to illustrate things, and then I go through them. It's as if I'm doing it. Like I record. It's the course as it stands at the moment is pre-recorded. So there's 9 different videos, nine sessions, and basically it's me, my voiceover on on PowerPoint slides. But at the end of each session, there is a worksheet. So this is part of the kind of teaching process that I go through. Is I said, look, listen to here's session one. Here's the worksheet, and there's stuff for you to do. There's an assignment there. There's lines where you write stuff down. So I encourage people to listen to the session, complete the worksheet before they go to the next session. So they're kind of internalizing and they're participating. Because this, like with courses, sometimes we get into courses and we just like we're half present, half not, and we're listening to it, and then maybe we see something out the window, and then maybe we're halfway through and we don't even go back for the rest of the course, and that happens a lot. So I don't want that to happen. That's why I have these worksheets in between sessions to get people to actually participate and to internalize what they've learned and to build up. In the end, they're going to have these 9 different worksheets as a pile, as a little binder, as it were. I also have some kind of bonus materials. There's like one of them is a prompting guide, where if you are sitting with your grandmother, how do you prompt her to remember? So, hey, grandma, like if when you walked out your door when you were 10 years old, what did you see? When you went to the shops, what shops did you go into and what did they have? When you left school, Grandpa, what what was your dream? What did you want to do? And then what happened? And so it's one of the downloads, one of the kind of bonus downloads is 52 different prompts to actually, and that is that those 52 prompts are really interesting because you can do it to yourself. You can go through them and do it yourself. And it's really interesting to unearth stuff that you haven't thought about forever. I did it. Was it a while back? My wife said, "Oh, do you remember that time we went to Pittsburgh?" And I was like, "I've never been to Pittsburgh in my life." And she said, "Sure you did. We went together." I said, "We did not." And she had to really prompt me and remind me of the specifics of that trip. And I was like, "Oh, wow, you're well, of course you're right." She could remember. I didn't. But then I did. And it's like we forget so much. And it's not like part of the prompting and part of this whole process is we our memories, there's back shelf, there's the back room storage of our memories, and there's the front window of our memories. And we often get live through life just looking in the store window, the front, the big memories that we hold in the front. But man, we got so many memories stored back there in the shed behind or on shelves back there. And that is where some of the amazing stuff is, in those memories and stories that we haven't thought about for a decade or decades. And that's what the prompts are for. It helps you unearth those, and you go, and you go back into the storage room and you pull out and it's like, oh man, I haven't thought about that for so long. I should give that guy a call. So again, it's kind of enriching. It's reminding you of the kind of tapestry of your life and the weave of your life.
Tell us about the free guide on your site. So if somebody wants to kind of check things out, you have sign up with an email address and they get your life story discovery guide.
Yeah.
What's in there?
It's basically it covers a fair bit of what we talked about today. It's basically a lot of it is the why. So the course is the practical, hands-on, step by step. That free. It's 47 pages. It's not nothing. It's not like one of those 3-page freebies. The substance there, but what it takes you through a lot of the why, the emotional journey of why this is important, how it can be good for you, how it can strengthen your family, how it can bridge gaps in the family, how it can bring people together. So it's a lot of the reasons why. In the discovery guide is to discover why you want to do this, and then at the end, if you think, you know what, yeah, I do want to do this. I've discovered the why. Then you go into the course, and that's the practical step by step. Okay, here's how we're going to do it.
So if somebody out there is listening to this and what their curiosity is piqued, or they know someone, like let's say they have an older parent and they see this opportunity, what would you say to them to encourage them to follow this thread?
Well, get the guide. The only thing you'll pay for the only payment for that is I'll send you a series of 3 or 4 emails in the days to come. But even the emails are kind of informative rather than pitching. Yeah, get the guide and talk about it. Talk about it with people in the family. Talk about it with, like say, it could be an elder relatives. Sometimes I guess I'm mainly speaking to like if I'm buying Facebook advertising for this, which I do to get people to see this. I'm targeting the 50 plus, 55 plus. But like you say, you could be 25, and you're thinking of your grandma or your parents or that old friend who's lived next door forever and used to babysit you when you were a kid. And that seems to be, I've mentioned before, I think, it seems to be a real motivator for some people. It's just almost like, I'm not ready yet, but oh man, I'd love to help. I wish I'd spoken to, I've got a friend whose mother, she had Alzheimer's. So, it's not a lot of fun. And she was saying, oh, I wish I'd thought about this for my mum before that took hold, and that I'd captured her story in time. Because again, like when someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever, it is that fear, the horror of everything is lost, everything in my mind, every memory, everything is gone. So it can be very, very powerful for them to invite them to let's capture that. Let's capture your life story. So yeah, I'd get the discovery guide. That's the starting point. That explores the reasons why, and then you can get the course for yourself if you want to do it for yourself, or you can get it to help, to go through it with an older relative or friend.
And I'll just say we don't have to mention the price because Nick may change it at some point, but it's very affordable and approachable. So if you're intrigued, I'd encourage you to check out yourawesomelifestory.com. Any final words for the people, Nick?
Well, if you're course creators or you want to create courses, um, do what I did, which is like follow the spark, follow the flame. There's lots of people who will say, "Hey, here are the hot topics. Here's where you need to be. Here's where you want to be," and that's okay. But I think your greatest work will come, and your most successful courses will come out of where it lights a fire inside you. It's like I say, this is like I'm ridiculous. I've published a number of courses, and I always think on day one, "Oh my goodness, this is awesome. 100 people are going to buy it in the first 5 minutes," and they don't. But it's what kind of drives me, right? And like I say, if you're not in love with your topic, it's really hard to keep going because it is a grind. You have to keep working it. It's a business. You have to keep working it. So find something you love, you want to share, that is important to you, that has meaning for you, and that you think has deep meaning for other people. And yeah, now when you invest the time, it's important. It's rewarding. So yeah, go for something you love with a spark.
I just thought of it as you were talking. Like if you were to use a course as like the finished product, you could, for example, like I'm thinking about this um, if I went through a prompt like, "Hey, what lessons do I wish my kids knew um, when they're my age or before they get here so they have an easier time or better time or whatever, what
Right.
would I teach them? And then is there a story that goes with that?" And you could literally like use a course structure, which are literally called life lessons or lessons. They could be life lessons and do that. And then even one, there could be a whole course about finances and money as an example, like, and then another course about love and another course about travel, another
It
course
could be.
about
It could be.
health. It's
And I mean, to the point about the story thing, it's like, say, if I say to one of my kids or grandkids, "Listen to me, I have years of experience. Let me give you some advice." Generally, it doesn't work. Like, "Hey, old person, just shush." Um, but if I say, "Let me tell you a story," and the lesson is embedded in the story, then that's something that people want to hear about. And that stories are teaching tools. The fairy, don't go into the woods because the big bad wolf. We tell stories to keep our kids safe. Don't go out after dark into the woods. It's a scary place. The wolves will get you. So yeah, stories are fun. Sorry, rambling.
no, it's good. It's good. Yeah, story is part of teaching. Um,
Absolutely.
that's Nick Usborne, yourawesomelifestory.com. Check it out. Get the guide. Thanks for coming back on the show, Nick. It's always a pleasure to have you. I can't wait to see where this goes as time goes on, and it's really providing a valuable service to the world and humanity and people's hearts, minds, and memories. It's very cool. Like you said, it's a spark, and the more I look at this project, the bigger that flame keeps getting. It's a good idea.
Cool.
So
Right, okay. Hey, and we should mention this is built on the whole thing is built on Lifter LMS. Come on, man, we gotta do a bit of promotion.
and Nick is a
Uh,
serial creator. He has many course sites built on Lifter LMS. So it's
Absolutely,
it's all
absolutely.
it's always fun to see what you do, and I love seeing it when it's something like this that can really put out a ripple of positive impact in the world and like
I
help
love
a lot.
that. That's one of the other things that is like there's a lot of kind of negative ripples in the world right now, all around the world. And I love the idea of putting something positive out there as a bit of a counterbalance, modest, but just a little thing.
And going back, like you said, we're really focused on the present and the future, and we have our recent window of memory, but like there's a lot of gems back there
Yeah,
to go
absolutely.
find.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back on the show, Nick. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.